So welcome to this module. And within this module, we are going to talk about a few other integrated development environments to run the Python code. And let me also tell you that we have, or let me tell you that there are a few options which vary in the IDEs that we are going to use. And one of that is graphical user interface. The look and feel, okay, of the screen that you're seeing would be slightly different. So we have already seen Spyder. Now let me do one thing. Let me launch Jupyter. So there we go. I just clicked on that. Jupyter is launched here. When you do a drop down on new, you see Python 3, which is IPython kernel. Click on that. And that would open an interface. And all you need to do is say 1 + 1. If you want to run this, you click on run and you get 2 over there. If you say 8 multiplied by 3, and when you click on run, it says that the output is 24. We will also import a specific data set into Jupyter. And then I'm going to show you how it actually works. And how would it appear when you load a data set into Spyder. And let me also show you another thing, which is called as Google Colab. For those of you who are getting errors when you try to download Anaconda to launch Spyder or Jupyter, I would say go with Google Colab. And when you launch Google Colab, you can always click on New Notebook, which would give you a new UI, graphical user interface, new GUI. And there we go. You can give a name, whatever name you want. Say you want to name it as kickoff with Python programming, right? You're kickstarting. Here also, you can always, give a separate name by clicking on that for Jupyter. Kickstart. Then you can give your own names. When I say kickoff.ipython, that's the name with which the Python file gets stored on your computer. The extension here is IPYNB, which is IPython notebook. And when you try to save your file here, when you try to save a copy or when you try to save as, and when you give a name and save that, this is also going to save as IPYNB, IPython notebook. However, when you use Spyder and when you use your regular Python interface, the files will get saved as .py, Python. Okay, so here, there are a couple of things that I wish to show you when it comes to Google Colab. You can always go to Runtime and click on Change Runtime Type. And here, when it comes to Hardware Accelerator, you can choose GPU, which stands for Graphical Processing Unit. And Graphical Processing Unit is considered to be a lot faster than your CPU, than your regular computers. And in the free version of Google Colab, also you have the opportunity to make use of GPU. And we have TPU, which stands for Tensor Processing Unit, which is specifically made available to handle something called as deep learning algorithms. What are deep learning algorithms? How do they work? Please do not worry about that. We will cross the bridge when it is time. There are also paid versions available within Google Colab. I'm using Google Pro, and Pro gives you an opportunity to also have access to high RAM, high memory. We also have an opportunity to upgrade to Colab Pro Plus. You can also do that. Nevertheless, I'll cancel this. Once you're done with that, you can always click on connect, and Google would automatically allocate a hardware for you, a computer for you. Okay, so you are connecting. Once it connects, yes, it is initializing now, and then it's connected. Now you can type. When you type 1 + 1, for example, and when you click on run, you get the output as 2. If you want the new line of code, you can just click on plus sign here. And you can say 8 multiplied by 3. And when you run that, you get to see 24. Friends, there are other IDEs also. And we are going to spend some time on those as well, just to understand the subtle differences between each of these graphical user interfaces, or IDEs, integrated development environments. Now let's get back to this. Here are the lines of code which we are going to understand. Do not worry, we are going to start right from scratch. I will ensure that you understand it like a team. Even before we get started, let me tell you that when you click on this option here, this would open a new script window for us. Let me show you that. I'll just click on that, and there we go. You can always delete this. This is not needed. It's just some basic information which pops up. What are the various libraries which one should be aware of? NumPy. NumPy has numerical calculations. Then you have SciPy, which has scientific calculations. Then you have Pandas, wherein you have data manipulation techniques. Then we have scikit-learn. And scikit-learn is also called as sklearn. This is used for machine learning libraries, algorithms rather, let me put it that way. Machine learning algorithms, information or the code pertaining to that would be available in scikit-learn or sklearn. And then we have another library. I'm tempted to introduce another library here, but that's okay. Stats models, which contains statistical analysis. Then we have matplotlib, which contains data visualization related functions or code, which someone else has written in the past, and we would try to reuse that. We also have Seaborn. Seaborn has advanced data visualization concepts within that. And these are the various libraries which exist. You must be aware of all these libraries, and each time we get into theory, and when we do all of those things in Python, I am going to do a recap of all these libraries so that they sink into you. So these are, okay, let me close this rather, because we already have one. So these are the lines of code which we need to understand. From your perspective, since you want to learn, I would say that you have to open a new window here and then look at whatever line of code is given here, 2 + 2. You need to type that. You need to type and then you need to click on run. And you get to see the output here. Each time you see a line of code, don't select that and click on run. Instead, type that in a new window and then execute. Only then will you learn. If you are going to look at this and if you do not practice, in your lifetime, you will not learn. In your lifetime, if you are going to use this code, just select the line and click on run, you will not learn. Every line of code until the last day of the training, you will have to type that by opening a new window. Look at what is given here and execute that. Only and only this will help you learn. Otherwise, you will not learn an inch. Trust me on that. Even for the next 5 years, if you just keep watching, you will not learn. Okay. Anything which you write after hash is called as a comment. Instead of making a note on your book, you can actually put a hash function, and anything you write after that is called as a comment. This will not have any effect on the output. For example, if I were to just run this line, if you see here in the console, 2 plus 2, and then you also have the hash, the line, the comment, and the output happens to be 4. So whatever is written after hash has no impact on the final output. So you have Python libraries, you know what, and if you want to install any library, I'll show you how to install that. However, a few of the most widely used or most extensively used libraries would come pre-installed. It will come pre-installed with Anaconda. So the advantage is that you need not again install the libraries. And I'm going to show you one thing on how to run this code on your local computer and how to run this in the sense, how to install the library on your local computer. And how do you install that using Anaconda? Okay, how do you do that on a terminal or using command prompt? And how do you do that on Anaconda? Both of these is something that we are going to learn, in some time. The moment you install a library, all the functions within that would get saved on your computer. And once it gets saved, you can always say import pandas as PD. And before I go there, let me show you where it gets installed and how that would appear. Just give me a bit while I get there and show you. We have, all of these will get downloaded in Python. So I'm going to that specific folder to open and then show it to you guys. Available here. Hopefully it will be here. So let me see here. All right, so I will certainly show you where Pandas gets installed and what are the various functions within that by going to that installation folder. But let me explain that. Any library that you invoke, say Pandas, is something that you feel you want to use. So you just say import Pandas. And I'll come to directory of Pandas in a moment. And then you need to use the complete name like this, Pandas dot within Pandas library Say you have a function called read underscore CSV, which will actually help you read a CSV file. How do you know what are the various functions within this? You just say pandas, and you say directory of pandas. When you run this, you get to see all the functions on how to read the XML file, how to read the CSV file, Excel file, everything would be there. How to read the Excel file, how to read the CSV file, how to read HTML file, right? So on and so forth. All these are the various functions. These functions have the code which someone else has written in the past. What are we doing? We're just trying to reuse that. Okay, we're just trying to reuse that. And here we have read underscore CSV. And when I go to the installation path of pandas, you would see this specific read underscore CSV function. I'll show you that as well. And you can use any of these functions which are called as inbuilt functions. All these are part of pandas, which people have written in the past. Okay, now let me go to the path where we have the file, and just you can copy the path like this. Right click on that, copy, go here and paste that. So let me paste it here. Okay. And when you run this, even if you do not have this function R, if I were to run it, in the variable explorer option, you would find the dataset. In the previous module, we tried to click on this option here, and then we try to upload the file. That means even if you do not know how to write this line of code, you can still, run or you can still load the files into Spyder. However, what are we doing here? We have imported the library. Within that library, we are calling a specific function called as read underscore CSV. And we just went to the path of the file. We right clicked on that. We clicked on copy, and we came and within double quotes, we pasted this entire path. So this would help you get the complete path of the file along with the name of the file and the extension. This is one way and the simplest way out. There are multiple other ways of loading, your files into Python. Now, each time typing this entire name probably is a tedious task. Assume it's a tedious task. So what would you do? If you're a lazy person like me, you will say, hey, let me import pandas, but let me import that using a shortcut, which is PD, using an abbreviation. So everywhere else, instead of typing the entire name as pandas, you give this abbreviated function. And look at here on the console, you get to see the results. You get to see the results in the console here. Now, you should use pd.read underscore CSV, and within the double quotes, you're giving the complete path, name of the file and the extension. And using this assignment operator equal to, you're assigning it to an object or a variable called education. So let us write down a few things. PD is a library. Within this library, you're using read underscore CSV, which happens to be a function. And within the double quotes, you're giving the complete path of the file along with the name of the file and extension. And using this assignment operator, You are loading that into an object called education. Okay, so these are a few names that you need to remember. And whatever name you give here, you can give any name of your choice. Whatever you feel is logical, you can give. You can say ABC also, doesn't matter. And that object would start appearing here. Okay, and it is appearing as a data frame. As I've told you, data frame is like a photo frame. Within a photo frame, you have your photo. In that way, within data frame, you have your data. And you know for a fact that we have 773 rows and 3 columns. And there are multiple other ways. For example, you can go here, you can just click somewhere here, copy the path, and you can paste that path here. And you also need to give the name of the file. So you can just say rename, copy that, and then you give the name of the file and the extension. But when I run this, it is going to throw an error. Look at the console window here. If I were to run this, it would say, hey, error, syntax error. Python does not understand Windows default path. In Windows, you will have a backslash. These are all backslashes. Python doesn't understand Windows default path. So we will either have to provide a double backward slash like this, okay, and then run the code. And then you can run this line of code. It would run without any error, or you can just put remove the backslash and then put a forward slash. And then it would work. If you were to run it, there we go. There is no error. Or if you want to stick to the Windows default path, let me copy this path here. Let me save that. Backslash. And then you also need to give the name of the file and extension. Okay, you can always say, let me go to properties and let me go to the name of the file and .csv. That is the extension if you see here. .csv. Okay, anyways. If you still want to stick to the Windows default path, you need to use R. You see R over there, you need to use that. When you use that and when you run it, you get to see education. Okay, now, these are the various ways of loading a data set into Python. I would say into Spyder rather. Because here you also have this option wherein you click on that and you can select the file and load it. And Python is case sensitive. What do we mean by case sensitive? Case sensitive means if I use lowercase education versus a proper case education, these two would be treated as two different files. Now let me do this. Let me just right click, copy the file, and let me paste it here. It will be very fast here, rather than copying the path and then giving the name of the file, etc. So if I were to run it, you have education here, which has 773 rows and 3 columns. And these two are two different objects or two different variables. They're not the same, so it is case sensitive. Here, yet another thing. Okay, friends, whenever you write programming, remember that in the first round of interviews, people usually ask questions which are verbal. They ask questions and then you answer. It will be more of a verbal conversation. Once you clear that, in the second round, they would give you a data set, a business problem, and they will expect you to write the code and try to solve the problem. And when they look at your programming lines of code, they look at the best practices. And the best practices to write the comments so that whoever looks at the code readily understand on what is it that you are performing here. For every line, for that case, you can write a comment on what that line does. Another thing is, either you can represent like this, a equal to 10, or you can put spaces like this. After the variable, give a space, assignment operator space, and then you write whatever you want to. This is according to the best practice. A equal to 10. So what are we doing? We are assigning number 10 using the assignment operator to this object or variable called A. We see A over there, and it is showing that A is an integer. Integers are those values which do not have decimals. Now, we are taking 10.1. Using the assignment operator, we are assigning it to an object called A. This happens to be a float. And float is represented using 10.1. I mean, decimals, the moment you have decimals, you would be calling that as float. Okay. And this A and this A are two different values. One is in uppercase and other is in lowercase. So both of those would be treated as two different objects or variables. So Python is case sensitive. Case sensitive. All right. Now, when you say education.info, you would get the information about this variable called education or object called education. Okay, if I were to run this, you get to see the results here. You have 773 entries, meaning you have 773 rows. And the row index values range from 0 to 772. Okay, from 0 until 772. And you have 3 columns. Column number, this is the first column, second column, and third column. And these have index values 0, 1, and 2 respectively. And it says non-null. Sometimes within the data set, some values might be missing. For example, if I were to double click on this, maybe sometimes some value might be missing. If a value misses, say a value is missing here, then against that specific column called maybe GMAT, it will say that 772 non-null values exist. Meaning one value is a null value because the value might be missing sometimes. And the data type pertaining to all these three happen to be integers. Do you have decimal values anywhere? If you have decimal values, it would be treated as a float. Now that we do not have a decimal value, it will be treated as integer. Okay, so you have integers. So you have 3 integer data types. And when it comes to memory usage, it's 18.2 kilobytes. Okay. So I have 16 GB RAM on this computer. Out of 16 GB, this specific data set or this specific object or variable is consuming 18.2 kilobytes of data, of memory rather. So each time you load an object or a variable, it keeps getting accumulated here. Okay, just remember that. Okay, next. So all these are the explanations which I've already provided when it comes to loading your data set. Now let's talk about exploratory data analysis. Even before we get into exploratory data analysis, I wish to switch to the mind map here, quickly explain you about the mind map. So if you were to go to 360-digit MG, and if you were to go to the mind map here, within the drop down, you see certification program in data science. When I click on that, you get to see this. You double click to expand and double click to collapse. Okay. And we have discussed about CRISP-MLQ framework or project management methodology, which contains 6 phases. Phase 1 is business understanding and data understanding. Within business understanding, you record your objectives and constraints and also record the success criteria. And then it is always recommended to write your objectives and constraints using 2 to 3 words, use the terms minimize or maximize. And project charter is the first document which gets created on any project, and you'll have all the details at a very high level. And then you go and collect the data which is needed to solve your business problem. And we have primary and secondary data collection techniques. And we discussed about the various data types. Once you have the data needed for your analysis, you need to perform or go to the second phase, which is data cleansing, data preparation, or exploratory data analysis, feature engineering. Yep, all these are the different names, which is provided to phase 2. And even before we get into the data cleansing steps, we thought we will understand the exploratory data analysis stuff, in which we have first moment, second moment, third and fourth moment business decisions and graphical representation. Within first moment, you have measures of central tendency. Within measures of central tendency, you have mean, median, and mode. Mean gets influenced by outliers. Hence, median is the best measure when you have outliers in your data set. And mode is that value which repeats itself maximum times. And mode is something that is calculated on categorical data as well as count data. But you can find out mean or median for count data as well. And if you have more modes, that means you might have clusters or segments within your data set. Then we discussed about second moment business decision, which is measures of dispersion. And we have spoken about variance, standard deviation, and range. The drawback or a disadvantage with variance is that units get squared. And how do you get back your original units? By taking a square root of variance, which would give you standard deviation. And then you have range, which is maximum value minus minimum value. Alongside that, you have third moment, fourth moment, and graphical representation. Before we get into these, we will try to run the code. Okay. Anything which you write after hash is called as a comment. Exploratory data analysis, and here we have measures of central tendency, which is also called as first moment business decision. If I were to open this data set, education. You have multiple columns or 3 columns for that case. Okay. If you want to refer to any of the columns within this data set or data frame or object or variable, all these are the different names. You go to that specific object, which is education, dot. If you want to refer to any of the columns, you use dot. And what do you want to refer to? Say work experience, dot. If you want to calculate mean, you say, I want to calculate mean, open and close the brackets. And when you run this line of code, you get to see the answer. Here is a mean, 57.5. When you say go to education, work experience, and if you were to calculate median, you get the value 52. If you were to go to that specific data set and that specific column, and if you calculate mode, you get to see that you have mode. Mode is let me open this. Basically, you'll understand. Let me click on work experience. Okay. If you look at all these values, look at 45. And 45 is getting repeated maximum number of times. And this 0 is just saying that you have one mode. If you have 2 modes, it will say one mode is 45 and another mode is say 46, for example, then it will give you 1. Indexing in Python starts from 0. So you have a single mode here, and that mode is 45. And the data type here happens to be integer, of course. That is an integer. Integers do not have decimal values. If you have decimals, that is called as float. How do I calculate variance? So you have education dot work experience. That is what will help you refer to this specific column called work experience, which is within this data frame called as education. And if you want to calculate variance, you just say dot var, and that would help you calculate the variance. And the variance happens to be 750.03. If you want to calculate standard deviation, it is education.workexperience.std, and you get 27.38. For range, unfortunately, you do not have an inbuilt function. Like we have inbuilt functions for mean, median, mode, variance, standard deviation, etc. We do not have an inbuilt function for range. Okay. So we calculate like this. Let me get the maximum value of work experience. And how do you refer to any variable or column within a data set? You take the name of the data set dot the column name work experience minus minimum value of education dot work experience. When you subtract the maximum value minus minimum value, you get something called as range. So what you're trying to do here is you're calculating this by subtracting the maximum value from the minimum value, and using this assignment operator, we are storing it in an object called range. And if you see here, you get to see range, and 270 is a range, right? So if I were to just run and see what is there in range, it says that range happens to be 270. So let us now get back to a few other discussions. And let's talk about next set of topics. So these are the various things that we have spoken about. We understood the difference between uppercase N and N-1. Why is it in that way? We also could, figure out one of the riddles that we have. Before we get into this expected value,